Yes.
Oh, okay. The noise is really.
Yes.
The book The Other Abuses, Mysticism and Misogyny in the Label of Sicily, about an important oracular center dedicated to Demeter at Enna and Lake Pelusa, seeks a publisher. A chapter from that book appears in the fall 2005 issue of the Journal of Feminist Studies in Religion. Please help me welcome Marguerite.
Testing, thank you. So good morning, everybody. I thought I would just take a minute to invite us to come in and get seated. And if you are seated already, to close your eyes, if you would. And as you close your eyes, feel your breath, your breathing, in and out, nurturing your body. And feeling the weight of your body in your seat, the weight of your feet against the floor, and feeling the pull of Mother Earth in what we call gravity. So feeling your root from where you are sitting, sending a root down into the earth, through your seat, through the ground, the foundation, and the earth, into the molten center of the earth, and feeling it curl there and take root. And feeling your branches reaching out to the sky. And as you breathe in from your root and the branches. And have that breath meet in your heart. And I acknowledge today the deities about whom I will be speaking. Nit, Athena, Tanit. I acknowledge the ancestors, the Amazons. May your stories be told. I also wish to thank Heide again for her brilliance. Yesterday, while she was speaking to Peggy, I was falling into the place of the long lineage of great German thinkers. She really belongs there. And thanks to Genevieve. And thank you for your dedication to this work, and to Genevieve for your generosity. So, in search of the Libyan Amazons. So we're looking at Amazons that are before the Amazons that Vicky was talking about today, according to the historian Diodorus Siculus of 80 BCE. He talks about tribes that were called Libyan, meaning all of Africa, with the possible exception of Egypt in the ancient world. And so he says that they existed many generations before the Trojan War. He himself is a historian, and he was basing his depiction on Dionysius of Mytilene, who is sometimes disparaged as a mythographer, but I believe that in the mythology is history. So I take a euhemeristic view of mythology, and I am considering this as history. These Libyan Amazons were women. They were nomadic pastoralists. They ruled the society, governed it. They were warlike. They wielded very well the bow and arrow, and had prowess on the horse in their battles. They lived on the island of Hespera in the marsh Tritonis, which would be North Africa, and we will talk about position of where that would be shortly. And one of their queens was Medina, who conquered much of North Africa and Anatolia. And it is my belief that some of the descendants that we hear about in the Greek mythology I discussed this in a paper that I have written recently and plan to publish as a book. Another of the that was there along with Marina were the Gorgons, which is quite interesting given that we have the Gorgon Medusa as a terrifying image in mythology. But their queen was named Medusa. She was ultimately conquered by a Greek warrior called Perseus. So this puts an entire mythology of Medusa being beheaded. This could be depicting an historical event. Now, I would like to suggest another possible etymological origin for the name Amazon, and that is Amazia, which Vicky also points out in her excellent book, The Double Goddess, the similarity between Amazia and Amazon. Amazia being the name for the indigenous North Africans of the classical period, and earlier there's evidence that that term was used to denote these people from at least classical Greek times, and the name means free people, more or less. Cognates of this name, Amazia, possibly could have been ancient tribal Herodotus and others, such as the Mazises, the Machiles, who lived at Lake Tritonis, which we will talk about, and the Maxis. The Tuareg also call themselves Umazar, and forgive me if I'm botching this. Incidentally, I want to point out that I am a white Western woman bringing an interpretation to peoples who are not my own, so it's not my intention to further colonize by appropriating this material or casting interpretations that may not fit for the peoples themselves. It is a sensitive issue. And my intention is to begin a dialogue here and be one of cooperation and not colonization, and so I would appreciate feedback in that regard afterward. So, could have been a garbled attempt by the ancient writers to transliterate an African name? Okay. Herodotus, the historian and ethnographer born 484 BCE, talks of the indigenous Africans as being two groups, either Libyans or Ethiopians. A number of people spanning all across North Africa. I will not obviously mention them all. One is the Machiles, who he says, he confirms, lived near the river Triton. So this was an actual body of water, lake and times. And in the mythology/history, we also have the story of the god Triton rescuing Jason's ship. And Poseidon was also associated with a lake cult of this area. Now, the most interesting tribe from our perspective that Herodotus talks about is the Osses. They lived on the shores of Lagoon Triton, and we can, in this, since we have learned in the past few days the characteristics of a matriarchal society, we can see in his description all of the characteristics of a matriarchal society, or many of them. Casual sexual relations, no marriage. Communal child-rearing, paternity of secondary importance. And I might add that when you read Herodotus' description of this, he doesn't say this. He basically says, a thing where the women were common property, and, so you have to read through these androcentric views to discern hermeneutically, and that's what we're all doing here as feminist scholars in this room. They worship Nit, who was also Athena, and that has been confirmed by historians and mythographers that really was the same goddess. They engaged in ritual sacrifice to the sun and moon. We have heard that motif already with Malika Grashoff, and we'll be talking about that a little bit more later. Most interesting from our perspective to identify them as possible Amazons who engaged in warfare are the fact that their young virgin girls had a ritual in which they fought each other with sticks and stones to the death. And the young woman who reigned over that was paraded around the lake in a chariot in a Corinthian helmet, which probably has origins in Africa and not Greece. And this may have been what I interpret to be a ritual to select a high priestess or a new priestess. So, a little bit gruesome here. And the women wore red goat skin garments called the aegis, which may have been a form of armor. This may have been what protected them from the bows and arrows. And they uttered a ololuge, the ololuge, which may have sounded something like this. Sound familiar? Yes. And the word hallelujah comes from that. So the next time you're in church hearing hallelujah, you can think of the Amazon screaming. Okay, and here's where the Aussies are located in this northern African region, which I'll show you more clearly in a moment where that is. We're talking about what's contemporary Tunisia, and this is what Tunisia looks like today as a country. We're going to be focusing on this region here where I took a research expedition with a number of people. This is the Chot El Jerid, the lake there, which is now very much dried, a salt lake, and is what historians and scholars have pretty much identified as possibly being Lake Tritonus, due to various geographical correspondences in the ancient record. We're going to be talking a little bit about Tozur and Kapsa or Gafsa, contemporary Gafsa, Gebes, Gumrasen over here, where the northernmost cave paintings in Africa are located. You'll see some of them. Now, were there such things as Amazons? Well, in the Tassili rock paintings, which are in Algeria, due south of Tunisia, we have been ranging back BCE, if not earlier, although they span into, the early classical Greek period. We have images, possibly of women. This one carrying a rod and an axe, which is very much associated with Amazons in the descriptions of the Amazons in the Black Sea area, the northern ones that Vicky was talking about. We see what obviously are women here because of their dress. This is a female figure running the chariots, and Herodotus does confirm that one of the tribes, at least, had the women as the chariot riders. We have women with sticks again, and again here, and this does call to mind this stick and stone ritual for me of those Aussies girls. Okay, so we have evidence in Tunisia of a civilization called the Capsian that ranges from 7 to 4000 BCE. This is an image from it, and this is an anthropomorphic head, possibly a woman's head. Again here, I just wanted to show you a little more topographic and what it looks like surrounded by its mountains. So geographers, sometimes geologists dispute that this could have been Lake Tritonus, but sometimes people think that this gulf here could have been the area where there may have been some geological changes, and that this island here, which is now Djerba, could have been the original island of Hespera. But it's quite difficult to make those correspondences. I'm going to be talking generally. Whoops, sorry, didn't mean to do that. Yes. Okay, so important to note that we are talking here about a particular goddess that was worshipped by these Aussies and was essentially the goddess of these Amazons, Neith Athena. Now we know her from the Greek story. Her mother, Metis, which means wisdom and associated with the snake, was pregnant with her when Zeus decided to swallow her, and therefore appropriating female wisdom and power for himself. It gave him indigestion, though, and Apollos in friendly combat. Is that a reference to the Aussies ritual? Now, Neith in the Libyan Egyptian story, the much older version, Neith is the oldest of the old. She's pre-dynastic and Libyan. Incidentally, an excellent book, The Shining One, Hagen, H-H-E-A-N, I believe. She has really looked into the Amazigh roots of Egyptian civilization and talks about Neith. She was the ruler of heaven, earth, the underworld, and everything. She was a totality goddess. Hathor and Isis are later versions of her. She was virgin creating, self-begotten, and begot the whole world. Nurturer and slayer. We have the totality. Fierce and motherly. Her symbol is was a patroness of war, which we will see, And she was also a goddess of weaving, which we will talk about a little bit more. Her name also is configured as the NTR, Nitr or Nit, thus indicating that Tanit, who we will talk about a little later, the goddess of Carthage, North Tunisia, may be her Carthaginian Phoenician form, because they cannot peg that name Tanit with any goddess anywhere else except for there. Here is the Chot El Djerid today, and you can see that, this is just a tiny, tiny fragment of miles and miles of dried out sort of salty lake bed. In ancient times, according to the historian Skylax, or the geographer, spanned 900 square miles. So, and when you look at that map, that is if that whole thing had been filled with water, that would have been a quite impressive and large lake. The water is salty, so that's a whole other thing. It's like a womb, because it's like an amniotic kind of vent. And here we have the Belvedere, which would overlook the Chot. Over here, that would be, say that could all have been filled with water. This would have been a sacred lookout point, and interestingly, it is associated, so this may have been an important sacred site. So Neat, we have Neat here, and she is associated with bow and arrow as one of her symbols again. So when we went to Tunisia, I went with 3 other people. The group was co-led by my colleague Gerhard Pulawa, who has done some excellent work on Amazons, and that is on the web. I don't have his website at my fingertips, but we went together, and one thing I started noticing right off the bat were the ancient doors in Tozer's old quarter, or Ouled El Hadef. Many of them have symbols and other things. And here we see crossed arrows. We see the arrows right here. This, I was told, was a fish symbol. Obviously, this could be the ancient vesica piscis, which is the woman's vulva entrance. Many doors such as this. These are from the medieval period, but it's my belief that they reflect a very, forgotten perhaps by the time they were made, but a very long, ancient lineage of symbolism that was operative in this area. Here again, we see the arrows, and we see here with what looks like an anthropomorphized goddess figure, which very much resembles some things in Old Europe. The star, which is another important motif, as we will see shortly. And even on this, which is a wedding dress, we see crossed arrows, which I noted on the detail. And then arrowheads spanning from 7 to 4000 BCE in the area of Kapsa. Again, this is all around Lake Tritonus. There, of course, any warrior peoples and the male tribes of the north also warred, so we can't necessarily say, well, this is evidence of Amazons, but there were many arrowheads found that would have been the tips of the bows and arrows, obviously. Looking at some of the iconography of the Amazigh, this is a Tuareg symbol. There are many symbols apparently designating clans. And I just, this is a superficial Western impression, and I did not check what this means with the people, but I did happen to notice things like this, which are suggestive of arrows. And then this is from the Hunsuk Museum on Djerba, that island that I showed you. These are made by Jewish Amazigh who arrived either around the 5th century BCE or the 1st century BCE. So they've been on that island for quite a while. And these are amuletic necklaces that have power, prophylactic power to protect and to call in various powers. You see the hand of Fatima there, sorry. And I just happened to notice this motif here, on very strong Amazon-like symbols. And of course, what happens when you go on these trips, as many of you probably know, is that the synchronicities start happening. So the first day that we arrived in Tozer, we went to the Avis place, which is, where, in a town that's otherwise bereft of symbolism except for the doors. And what is the first thing I see? It's these crossed arrows. Combined with, on the outside, I don't even have this image to show you, a goddess that I later saw is possibly identified as being either Tanit or Neat. Okay, so, yes, thank you. Here again you see the doors, and now what you're seeing here is a Triton image. So I thought, is this also a visual reference to Lake Triton as well, thus confirming that this is the area in which all of this activity took place. And there you see them a little bit more close up, which also double as arrows. And then we have up in the north, the northern coast, the city of Carthage, Carthage, meaning the new city, founded by the Canaanite Phoenicians who came over in about 800 BCE. But who was it who founded the city? Well, a woman, Dido, Elisa. And her name also possibly could have been Didon Elishat, which indicates her Middle Eastern origin. A quasi-legend history about her that she escaped the tyranny of her brother, who was doing a power play on the Levant coast, and came with a retinue and founded Carthage and was able to carve out an area of land for her people. The goddess that she's associated with is Tanit, and here we see the glyph, which is a triangle with a line over it in a circle, so it's vaguely anthropomorphic. Frequently the moon is associated with this symbol. And there's Dido or Dido. This image is from Tozer has a display, a historical display, and this is their impression of Dido. Now, as we will recall, the matriarchal Osses of Herodotus' time venerated sun, moon, and Neat, and Malika Grashoff confirms the profound importance that the Amazigh women attach to the moon as a symbol of women's life-giving power, in that it is related to the female menstrual cycle, and the importance, she says, of the women in her culture having a mirror in the shape of the full moon. So does this emerge from the ancient Amazonian religion? I cannot recommend highly enough for those of us Western women who have been looking into this, Malika's two books, particularly Symbols and Magic and the Arts of Kabyle Women. As we'll see a little bit later, she really confirms that the theoretical postulates of Maria Gimbutas that you saw, that Joan Marler and Vicki Noble talked about, what those symbols mean, is a living reality for these Kabyle women who are a part of the Amazigh. So here we have another version of Tanit with the upraised arms, the moon, and then what is a star or sun. So moon, sun, upraised arm, and deltic triangle. And this site, this cave site, what you have are these images right here with those upraised arms, next to a horse, a person on a horse, don't know if it's male or female. These cave paintings have been dated from 10 to 5000 BCE. I would have to confirm that because of the domestication of the horse issue question, when that would have happened. This, though, I believe is a snake, as we will see in this next rock shelter. This is a listing, a cataloging of some of the animals, and I had at first ignored that little image of that line, and then I saw this and I said, oh my goodness, they're depicting a snake. So there we have that snake in association with those images of the upraised arms, which look to me like sacred images. And the snake is being associated with that wisdom aspect of the female, so those could have been sacred females. And then this is interesting that this is the modern Amazigh artistic rendition of the Orant and Ka gestures. This is a symbol of Amazigh rebellion against French rule. That is, it's a very long history that I won't go into, and I'm by no means the expert on it at all. But I just wanted to show you the relation. Okay, and then we have the Tunisian flag. So these symbols are still persisting. Are these Amazonian symbols? Now, the image of the crescent is one that we found repeatedly in Tunisia, and I credit my colleague Gerhard Prudauer with observing this. Here we have a 6th century BC impression of Amazon women fighting. These would be the ones Vicky was talking about in Greece. And you see that shield, which is called a pelta, is in the shape of a crescent moon. Is that accidental, or was that, you know, a symbolic power symbol that they wanted to have as a protection for themselves? I think the latter. Here on the Roman sarcophagus, we have the pelta with the indentation. Thus, it was quite surprising on that jewelry in Hunsuk, again, the Berber, the Amazigh Jewish jewelry, to see this pelta here. And this other interesting head, which I have seen also in African rock art as a being of some sort. Again, I don't know what was in the minds of the creators of this, but sometimes the creators don't even know themselves because they're transmitting something from a very long, long lineage, especially if they've been cut off from that lineage. They may still be transmitting the symbols and not knowing what the meanings are, although what's so great about Malika's work is that the women still understand the meanings. This wedding shawl, you see the pelta again. And then I just wanted to talk a little bit about so Amazigh women do tattooing, especially the older women, on parts of their faces, breasts, arms, and so forth. And these are some of the symbols that are on now. They are all, without almost exception, things that you can find in the ancient European art that involve images. And Malika Groshoff confirms that triangle symbol, particularly the one pointing down, is the woman's pubic delta. The diamond or lozenge is the, and this basically would be the open legs. The M or the W are the open legs of the woman, and that this is the entrance to the magical place where life transformed and brought into the world. So we have, you know, these fertility images, and these are two. This is a purse that I purchased, and you see the repetition of the triangles along with the X's or crossed arrows, perhaps. This just seems to be such a powerful description of lineage of women, you know, continuing throughout the ages. And then here, you know, these are just a couple of examples of the lozenge image, and here we have also scorpions and so forth, and other animals, lozenge. And then, so it was quite interesting to see this Tuareg symbol in that light, with its pubic triangle, its pelta shape, moon shape, it's a silver, and the orant posture as well, with indicating a vaguely anthropomorphic sign. Again, I do not know what the Tuareg themselves would say that this means, but me as an outsider reading this says, wow, that smacks of goddess to me, and possibly also Amazon. And the women are weavers, and as Malika confirms, weaving is not just weaving for practicality, but is a very, very sacred art. It has to do with bringing down the sun and the moon and transforming their energies into the human realm, and you know, transformation, the energy of women's ability to transform, to make magic, to create, manifest the world, as well as their babies. We also have the tradition of the marabouts, or the saints. These are Islamic saints, and but we have attached with them very ancient worship still going on. Women go there for the purposes of childbirth, and this is an ancient megalithic site not far from that ancient site. Tomb of, near the tomb of Sidi Saturi. Megalithic stones where the legend is that this saint turned people to stone at a wedding party. And if you recall the story of Medusa's head having the power to turn people to stone, that's very, very interesting. It's still used as a sacred site by the people, so this indigenous level is going on along with the Islam. Burnt offerings are made here. And I'm just going to quickly flip through to see the ancestress and the mother of all of the Tuareg people. So this is an example of the bones of this woman in her grave. Queen Kahina in the, I believe, 6th or 7th century of a Common Era We have an anachronistic throwback of an Amazonian woman, the Kahina, her name means prophet or priestess, who decided to rally the Amazigh people, but for a number of years before she was ultimately vanquished. So I won't go into that, just briefly mentioning the warrior woman archetype versus our idea here in this conference of peaceful societies. You know, when I teach, this really brings up questions about how complex this idea is of warrior women, because we heard Barbara Alice Mann saying, you know, don't beat them, get them to join you, is basically Iroquois. But you know, possibly decided to take up arms, and there is a long tradition of women doing so in Africa afterward, which I'm not even going to talk about. So it is confirmed that women have been warriors in that continent. What does this mean? Do we want to embrace this image? If so, how? Is it ethically acceptable for women to be warriors, or are we aiming for war to be obsolete? And then finally, where are the Amazons? The Amazons are in the car, and the Amazons are in this room.
I have a question to Margaret. You raised the question, how can we deal with this ambiguity? On the one hand, we have this matriarchal society in balance, or peaceful society. On the other hand, we have this warlike. I come from Vietnam, and we have also this thing, and it's very well known among the Vietnamese nowadays. And there was a time when they were invaded by the Han Chinese, and we had women who went to war. And now my question is, because you showed these symbols of triangles, and you showed these double triangles, which you interpreted as arrows. In Vietnam, we have also double triangles, but I wouldn't interpret as arrows, but double triangles, referring to the female fertile area. And I don't understand, how can you come to these double triangles to double arrows? That's my question.
Oh yes, I think you're referring to one of the doors, where there was a line and then it had two arrows coming off of it. Yeah, I mean, that does not have to be arrows at all. When I saw them in isolation, or when I saw them crossed, association of arrows, or because of the iconography of meat, and that her symbol was crossed arrows. But I think what you're saying is very legitimate, and that this interpretation does not necessarily have to, particularly because the triangle image is so strong as one having to do with the female vulva and power. So,
I'd like to add that Paola. Please come here.
While she's walking up, in Heian, Japan, arrows were actually aimed into the air, not as warfare, but to attract the kami as well.
I'm amazed by these discoveries and this de-invisibilization of the real civilization, which went lost. This case of Japan made more clear to me, kind of pending question that I have in my mind, which is also to understand better the passages, what happens from this fantastic period to the fact that the patriarchy took over completely, and my idea in Japan was the most clear example of this victory. So I have a curiosity about these passages, because I think that it's clear to everybody that today a patriarchal tribe is invading the little spaces we have left over in our lives, and I mean, it's a neo-patriarchy. it's a new wave, stronger than before, I would say, that is trying to colonize the leftovers, perhaps, of Earth. So the land, resources, those resources that are so linked with matriarchy. And our souls, our spirituality, to the private sphere of people. So I wonder if we shouldn't go further, only imagine how to preserve matriarchy, but how to actualize matriarchy today, or those values and those practices. And in this sense, I'm very grateful to Vicky, who started this perspective, because if we don't take this perspective from the beginning, we might lose ourselves in the fascination of these old civilizations and not remember what is happening today and how we can use them. I think this is all them, we can reactualize them. Because I would like to end that into somebody will have to dig on feminism. We can be the new matriarchy, the new. So I think here we have an incredible occasion to see what to say, to discuss among each other what to do with this fantastic knowledge today. What can be used? Basic struggle on this extreme struggles in a certain way, where basic resources are protected by people who are simple people. The state is not there. So it's somehow it's a structural that we have to think is matriarchy. Values, basic values of life, and indigenous people are the first in this forefront against pure patriarchy, which is inconsistent and violent, and a perfect symbol of that.
I'd like to make comments, and just to say that in some of the writings by Peggy Sande, she's expressed, in talking about the adat matriarchat, that it's not a matter of political power in the hands of women. It's a matter of being true to the essence of what the tradition, the lineage really means, which has everything to do with this basic respect for the natural world, and in aligning with the natural world and taking nature as our teacher. That is in itself the promise of the revolution, the promise of a regeneration, the promise of what is actually needed to make sure that the land and the human community is guarded and sustained. And I hope, Peggy, that I've given the proper respect to what you've written. So really, it has to do with saving the earth and ourselves from a place of respect
And I'd like to respond a little bit more in terms of the ways that I think we have to develop new structures and creative structures to replace the ones that have socialized us in such a negative way. For example, so many of my students tend to be in the age group of maybe 25 to 40. So many of them are thinking about becoming mothers and strategizing about how to do that. And one of the things that has happened for me since my introduction to some of the matriarchal people who are here and talking to us from the last conference is that little light bulbs went off in my head, and I thought, in California, the divorce rate is even worse than it is nationally. I heard % recently. I don't know if that's true, but it's pretty bad. And so we're sitting there with a structure that's clearly dead. We busted it, in the 60s, and now it's obvious that it's obsolete form as we have known it. And yet, the mythology and the deep fantasy or the deep dream have in our hearts of the kind of lifelong union or something that it represents And so people are still getting married in droves, and of course we saw the preeminent representation of that was when 4,000 gay and lesbian people hit the courthouse steps, you know, to get married in San Francisco. So it's very complicated. And so I've been suggesting to my students who are looking for Mr. Right that we start to create new forms. For instance, a woman of childbearing age who wants to have a baby and hasn't found her partner, her mate, for that purpose, that women might join together with other women in the same situation and make a legal contract, a promise, a vow that's equally solemn or equally true as the vows that we make when we marry, and make a contract for 10 years to share a house, 2 or 3 women, and have your babies, and make a legal contract so you don't bail out of the contract when you find a boyfriend, you know, and that we really learn to be true to one another and honor the contracts that we need to make with other women for all the reasons that I suggest. We need to do that for our own survival. So let's get creative about it. And then the men can still come and go, which is what they do anyway.
I would like to remind you that tomorrow morning, this question, what can we do politically with this knowledge and with our new contacts to all these wonderful indigenous peoples, tomorrow morning is the main topic of the big panel when all the speakers will be here and give their statements, what the political statements to this subject and what about today and about the future and so on. So I would like to invite you for tomorrow morning. It's a very important part of the conference.
Not just what, it's how.
Right. I have to make a little addendum, addition to what I said, because I hope that I didn't give the wrong impression. To have patriarchal men in the seats of power is only leading us further down the road to destruction. That women and men must be there at least in equal numbers. So I did not mean that women should not take part in politics. So please understand that. In fact, we need to step into that arena and have our voice heard even more.
And in addition to what Vicki was communicating about as an additional structure, as a contemporary priestess, one of my more, increasingly more than marriages is, and I, extend that to the greater community, is a year and a day to have a formal ceremony and celebration between men, between women, between multiple, members of the family or community that make a commitment for the right to be family, a solid commitment for a year and a day. Very popular, and especially in the northern Bay Area.
Some more questions. 2 questions. Oh? Yes, Savitri, come here. Savitri Shankar,
I shall be brief. First of all this effervescing congratulations and admiration for all the speakers. I share that. We are so blessed. Now I have a couple of comments and a question. The first comment is a caution on universalizing and globalizing religious symbols. For example, the snake. Freud has taught us that it is a phallic symbol. In the Hindu tradition, the snake is very female-friendly and androgynous. And the triangle. In the Hindu tradition, the triangle with the point down is the goddess, triangle with the point up is the male deity. And when they are superposed, like the Star of David, that means male and female powers in total equilibrium. So that's the triangle. Now, I was very gratified to hear, I know that the symbol, one of the symbols of Amaterasu is the mirror. In India also, in the Hindu tradition, the earliest temples of the goddess, they had no image, they had the mirror. So, the mirror is transformed. Now, my question was, this is maybe a little bit of chauvinistic question to the Amaterasu speaker. We have a virgin autonomous goddess at the very tip of India called historians and anthropologists say that she is the site of the longest continuous worship on the Indian subcontinent. And she is a very auspicious, charismatic goddess, even though she is not supported or bolstered by a male partner. And her worship goes back to pre-Christian times. There are reports of Greek scholars and Greek travelers being worshipped at the tip of the peninsula. So I wondered where our Kanyakumari rates in age with Amaterasu. It's just sort of a frivolous question. But if you would know how far the cult of Amaterasu goes.
Wow. Well, obviously there's physical evidence in the Ise Grand Shrine only to somewhere around 500 because writing did not really take hold in Japan until 600 CE. It's very, very difficult. We also have difficulties in Japan because most structures are built of wood. The soil is very acidic, it's a very wet climate, and so physical remains, unless it's stone or clay, fired clay, are really scant in the Jomon period. I'm speculating, and I do put forward that perhaps Amaterasu Mikami dates back to approximately somewhere in the neighborhood of 4,000 to 1,000 BCE in what we see. We would combine what we find in the Jomon called those dogu figures that you see, and then the physical remains we find in the stone circles. Of course, we can't date the stones themselves or the placement themselves, but what is with them. Again, probably somewhere, 4,000, 3,000 BCE. But that is my speculation. Obviously, there are many scholars that would disagree with me, and they would disagree that the Jomon culture was either sun worshipping or goddess worshipping, because of course they were just fertility figures.
Thank you. A short slide statement of mine. I would support the question of Savitri that the Durga Kali Kumari complex is pretty very, very old. But we are not in a competitive situation here. I think each continent, especially with these both examples, or if we look closer to this research, we look closer to history in a matriarchal lens, then we will find in some continents very, very old matriarchal goddesses. We should not count which is older, something than on. They come from the roots of humankind and of the cultures which have been created by women. Yes. Thank you.
Add something about the mirror. The mirror is one of the objects connected with female shamanism from the earliest times all the way down through, right this minute, where it's still being used by many women, mirror women in Tibet, they call them, and that it was carried on the belts of the Amazons, and they have unearthed burials, many burials in Central Asia of women warriors and priestesses with carrying a mirror on their belts.
Marguerite asked the question about women in war. Do we want to be warriors, or do we want to have war be obsolete? And I think that as a woman warrior, I have to use my words and say, I want war to be obsolete. So that question.
Thank you all. Is this a question? You want to give answers? Last question. Please be short, and the answers also please be short.
I'm sorry, and I ask for your patience on this question. It's to Marguerite, and it's as the woman as a warrior, and mention had been made of fire and women, the association there. And it seems to me right now, in this day and age, that we're trying to protect the earth, and we need to become warriors again, in some way, in some form. And I'd like if you can address that somehow. Thank you.
Yes, it's such an important question, and by the idea of having war become obsolete, that doesn't mean that we try to pretend we don't have aggression or that we try to do away with our revolutionary spirit. The way I look upon one possible way of transforming those warrior energies from physical killing of other people into positive action is through personal transformation that recognizes the two sides that we have of ourselves, or the multiple sides, real sense, although I'm not a Buddhist and don't claim to be an expert in it, but that we are able to acknowledge the fierce side or even the evil side of ourselves. That's very, very critical alchemical work for women, and I mean alchemy in the positive sense of reclaiming that. Thank you, Claudia. But that transformative type of work so that the impulses toward aggression and the anger that arises when we are violated, happen that annoy us, can get tempered, not come out. So this is a daily practice. So it also this has to do with how do we create matriarchy on earth again in a more widespread way. I believe that we all have to do this profound inner work of acknowledge could kill either with our thoughts or with our physical bodies just as well as we can nurture. And that when those killing energies come up, we have to recognize them, become responsible for them, and make a choice of how to respond.
I just want to add one thing, not so much in contradiction, but just as a kind of subtext to what Marguerite is saying, all that being obviously true. There's some way that in our culture we've become sentimentalized about this problem, and the fact that women are not able to protect ourselves and protect our children against this incredible worldwide pandemic of violence against women, which the UN declared last year to be the worst human rights abuse happening. It's all over the planet, and women are just stupefied in some way. And I think that we need to just say no, or whatever, or that's a buzz phrase, but there's some way that we need to come back into our stance that says that is not possible. You may not violate me, and you may not violate my children. And that might be shamanistic or psychic, and it might be different than that. It might be more physical. I don't really know. But I think we have to be willing to anchor ourselves in that refusal to allow ourselves to be the victims of violence any further.
Well, one of the questions that I asked in terms of what is it that is important for societies to be sustainable is patterns of conflict resolution, technologies of the sacred that relate to conflict resolution and promote it. And one of the most is the ritual dance, community dancing. And it's very difficult to hold anger with someone that you're dancing with.
Thank you so much. It's very good idea, matriarchal idea.
Can I just say about that is that one of the societies in which the ancient dance is continued is in Bulgaria, in which the patterns of the dance are the ancient patterns that are found on the oldest pottery. And if anyone is interested in actually experiencing that, please do go to the website archaeomythology.org, because I'm planning a journey there to experience the most ancient ritual dances for women there. So archaeomythology.org, you go to events and you find it. But it's important to experience it, not just to think about it, because it is.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Here's a woman who wants to make a statement, only a statement of one sentence. Please be short.
There's a lot of Texans here. In November, on November 8th, this election, there's a constitutional amendment. It's called Proposition 2, and they want to define marriage in the Constitution in Texas. And so I urge you all to go vote against it. It'll also ban common law marriage, which we have here in Texas. And it's really easy to get married. So you just have to say you are. So I just wanted to let everybody know that November 8th, please vote no on Prop 2 because it's going to define marriage in our Constitution.
So she's from Texas, of course, not Mexico. And now we have lunch break and we will continue here, HAGIA.com. Thank you. Com. Even the Congress of 2003, we have it in the internet and it will be remain there for years that the people can take the abstracts and type. All the abstracts are presented so that everybody who wants to know can see what was going on. The same will be for this, but we will keep it for a longer time in the internet site and so continue with the information about these two events.
Send you the e-list of all the people that are here, the address list. And you can also look on www.gift-economy.com. And we have a Gift Economy e-list. If you want to get on that, email me, and my address is jenva@aol.com, but that's on that gift-economy.com website. You can find us there.